Are you struggling with procrastination and lack of motivation, and you wonder, how can I develop more willpower? Well, I'm here to tell you that willpower is the wrong goal. If you try to develop willpower, it will totally sabotage your ability to stay consistent with your work, and so I'll teach you what to do instead. Now, in the past 7 years of being a coach who works with highly ambitious people who struggle with procrastination and self-sabotage, oftentimes willpower tends to be what people go to try to solve that problem. So it's, if I could just be disciplined and have willpower and I could just make myself do things to move myself forward towards my goals. But there are two big problems with using willpower to try to motivate yourself toward your goals. Ultimately, willpower, number one, is a limited resource. So if you're trying to have willpower be the thing that takes you through and helps you stay consistent with your goals, that willpower is going to run out. But the second reason why willpower isn't a good solution to procrastination and lack of motivation is something that we'll get into a little bit later on in the video, but it overrides the real reason why you're procrastinating and self-sabotaging in the first place, instead of actually addressing the root cause. So you want to, as little as possible, use willpower as a source of motivation. Now, willpower is a top-down motivational force. It's where you decide with your mind, I'm going to do this thing, you put your nose to the grindstone, and then you do it. And what you want to do instead is you want to start motivating yourself from the bottom up instead of the top down. So your bottom up motivation comes from your natural tendency to exert energy in a particular direction. Think about it this way. If you forced yourself to do absolutely nothing until you wanted to do something, then that urge to want to do something, that's the bottom up motivational force. So real sustainable motivation comes from that bottom-up force and being able to channel that bottom-up motivational energy in the direction of what it is that you're trying to work on. And there's a Taoist concept called Wu Wei, which basically translates to action, non-action, or effortless action. And when you are in that state of Wu Wei, things get done, and yet there's no top-down force applied. And there's a quote that's associated with Wu Wei that basically translates to, nature never rushes, and yet everything gets completed. And so that means that the work gets done without any top-down force causing it to get done. And in order to stay consistently motivated, this is what you want to aim for. But there are some things that stand in the way of your capacity to tap into that bottom-up motivation. So to list off a few of the reasons as to why you might be dealing with procrastination and self-sabotage and having issues with tapping into that consistent bottom-up motivation, let's say that you have some limiting beliefs that are there, that whenever you start to actually try to tap into that bottom-up force of motivation, it discourages you and takes the wind out of your sails. Or let's say that you have a really big goal off in the future that you want to achieve, and you have to work consistently over a long period of time to achieve it, and yet you find yourself procrastinating because part of you is afraid of experiencing certain uncomfortable situations and feelings associated with the pursuit or the achievement of that goal. Or let's say that there's a part of you that knows that something about the path ahead is deeply misaligned with you, but you're just not consciously aware of it yet. But this part of you holds you back to try to reroute you in a more aligned direction. So there are many things that might be keeping you from tapping into that consistent bottom-up motivation, but all of these relate back to the shadow. Now, shadow is a term that was coined by Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung to describe all of the parts of ourself that we've gone selectively unconscious to. And when I think about the shadow, I like to think about the shadow like a dark closet that we split off parts of ourselves and we put it in the closet, we lock it away, and then we become unconscious to those parts to forget about them. And these parts of ourselves that we put off in the shadow, they aren't just one-off qualities. It's not like, I'm repressing my greed, or I'm repressing this personality flaw. Instead, these aspects operate like their own autonomous beings, almost like we split off a part of ourselves and it becomes a little mini personality, a little mini version of ourselves. And all of your shadow aspects are 100% you, but they're acting autonomously in the shadow, and they might be sabotaging your goals, holding you back from being productive towards your goals. And so a lot of times, what we think of as procrastination, laziness, lack of motivation, self-sabotage is actually a part of ourselves that we're unconscious to, holding us back, and holding us back for a very important reason. And so this is why willpower doesn't work, because willpower is when we, as the conscious personality, go, I'm going to do it anyway, and we ignore those resistances and we totally railroad over what those shadow aspects are trying to communicate to us. And one of the things that's really helpful to know here is that if you have a part of yourself, an aspect of yourself that's in the shadow, that's sabotaging you and holding you back, there's always a benevolent reason for that. It's always something that's trying to serve you. It's never doing it just for the sake of sabotaging you or making your life harder. But when it's happening, it really feels like self-sabotage. And so what we try to do is we try to resist it. We try to use willpower to force ourselves over it. And then what happens is that makes the problem a lot worse, because then that shadow aspect actually has to resort to more intense strategies to get you as the conscious personality to listen to it. And that's how a small procrastination issue becomes a big procrastination issue. Now, if you want a bit more help tapping into that bottom-up motivation so you can be consistently motivated, I highly recommend checking out my free webinar, 3 Shadow Work Secrets to Get Out of Your Way and Reach Your Full Potential Without Having to Fight Yourself, and the link is down below in the description box. Now, to share some practical real-world examples of how the shadow can hold us back from achieving our goals and being consistently motivated toward them, I'm going to share some client examples that I've seen over the past 7 years being a coach. One example that I've seen quite frequently with many clients is, if I'm successful at this, my family members aren't going to appreciate it. My brother's going to be jealous. My mom's going to put me down. So oftentimes we can try to keep ourselves unsuccessful and small and to procrastinate and self-sabotage and all the other things in order to maintain connections with our family or to avoid a family member being jealous of us. Or another common example that I've seen with coaching clients is that there can be like an imposter syndrome or a sense of, I don't have enough authority. I'm not important enough to work with the people that I want to work with. So for example, let's say that somebody wants to work with CEOs and they want to be a coach to CEOs, and yet they're like, CEOs are up here and I'm down here. There's a sense of like projecting a kind of power onto other people that people don't actually have, and then not feeling that sense of authority within themselves, which creates a sense of imposter syndrome and creates a feeling like, no, I just need to do this other thing instead because that's not open for me. And that can come from a shadow aspect of themselves that feels inferior compared to other people. Or let's say if we take it into a more social goal, like let's say that somebody wants to socialize, but it's the case that there's part of them that bore the brunt of some trauma of being, let's say, left out of their family or ostracized in some kind of way. And so now when they go to socialize with people, the stakes feel too high because they feel like others are going to abandon them. And so what they do is they just avoid other people to avoid that abandonment. So consciously they can want to socialize, but there might be an unconscious pull or into isolation. So as you can see, if you really want to tap into that bottom-up motivation and to be able to be consistent and flowing with your productivity and your motivation, you're going to want to work with your shadow aspects. And so to give an analogy to help you work better with your shadow aspects, I want you to think about yourself, the conscious personality, the part of yourself that you call me or I, as the president of a board of directors. And let's say that on that board of directors, you have 5 different shadow aspects. And each of these shadow aspects has their own wants and needs and perspective and boundaries and goals. And so they all operate like their own little mini personality. And so let's say that you, as the conscious personality, come before the board and you say, okay, here's the goal that we're going to do. I want to create this business and we're going to have to do X, Y, and Z in order to create this business. And then let's say you start running into procrastination or self-sabotage, or you're having trouble with consistency. What I want you to recognize here is that that's one of the members of your very valued board of directors posing an objection to you. And keep in mind, there's always a very important reason for that objection. It's not something that you can just ignore. And so if you're a good president of the board of directors, what you're going to do is you're going to validate the objection, you're going to hear it out, and then you're going to try to make changes in order to make that aspect more comfortable with going forward with your goal. So let's say that you had a goal where you wanted to be a lot more visible. Let's say that you wanted to create a brand where you're the face of the brand. So you're going to be seen by a lot of people. And then one of your shadow aspects is afraid of that. And so it poses an objection and says, I'm not so sure about that. What if we get exposed as a fraud? Well, what you would have to do then is you would have to validate that concern, recognize that concern is real and valid. And then you would have to dig deeper to figure out, okay, where is that fear actually coming from? Was there like an earlier situation where that happened? And what would be so bad about that? And eventually you want to get down to the root of it, what the real fear is. And so maybe the real fear is that, oh, I always judge people as frauds, and so I don't want to be on the chopping block of my own judgments. If so, I would have to drop the judgment toward people who are coming across that way and to be able to exercise compassion and understanding towards them. Or maybe it's the case they grew up with an older sibling that was always trying to embarrass them and expose them as not knowing a lot, and so they're afraid of a repeat of the same situation. Or maybe they have a fear of letting people down, and it's like, oh no, if I am an imposter, then I'm going to let people down. So there can be many reasons why a shadow aspect might bring up an objection. And so you, as the conscious personality, as the president of the board, would actually need to question that aspect, look deeper, figure out what the root cause is of the objection so that you can work through the objection, so that you can get that aspect on the same page as you going forward. That way it isn't like, oh, I'm trying to go towards this goal, but this aspect is like resisting it every step of the way. But let's say that you're a tyrannical president of this board of directors, or maybe you're even unaware that you even have a board of directors that you need to consult with. What's going to happen is that you're going to try to use willpower to just strong arm these aspects and to try to like override them. And when it's the case that you ignore your shadow aspects and their objections and you just think, oh, I'm just so lazy, I just need to get over this resistance, what ends up happening is that those aspects don't just go away. They don't just allow you to go over their boundaries. Instead, what they do is they fight back. They stage a coup. They then take you totally out of commission as the president and they take over. And so if we think about your shadow aspects as autonomous beings, if you work with them and you try to work through like whatever their blocks and barriers are, they'll cooperate with you. But if it's the case that you play a zero-sum game with them and you say it's going to be my way or the highway and I'm just going to use willpower to overpower your objection, what's going to happen is they're going to dig in more and they're going to pull back and they're going to have the strength of the unconscious working in favor of their backward momentum. Now, if you're someone who's been struggling with procrastination, self-sabotage, mindset blocks, things that are just standing in your own way, and you've been trying things like willpower or discipline or time management schedules to try to overcome that, but they haven't been working, then I highly recommend putting in an application to work with me. The link is down below in the description box. I help my clients address the actual root causes that are holding them back so that they can move forward toward their goals from a state of consistent, frictionless productivity. So practically, to apply this analogy to real life, what you want to do is you want to notice whenever you're procrastinating, self-sabotaging, dealing with inconsistent motivation, when you're holding yourself back, any of those things. And you want to recognize it as an objection from one of your shadow aspects. So that's the first step. The second step is to validate it. Recognize that it is coming from a self-interested place. It is trying to serve you, even if it is totally messing up your plans. And one of the things that I notice that my clients tend to do when I try to get them to validate things is they want to start explaining to their shadow aspect why the shadow aspect should get on board with their conscious personality's goals. But it really has to be the other way around. Instead, the conscious personality has to listen and learn from the shadow aspect. So again, recognize your resistance as an objection from your shadow aspects. The second step, validate it. The third step, learn from the shadow aspect. Try to question yourself to really understand, where is this objection coming from? How am I trying to protect or serve myself by sabotaging myself this way? And then once you figure out the answer, the root cause answer, what you want to do is you want to make changes to accommodate that aspect's boundaries, needs, and wants. And so I'll give you some common client examples that I've run into over the past 7 years as a coach. So one client that I'm thinking of in particular, they had a goal. They really wanted to do something like creative, and they wanted to like move in the direction of creating this new creative business. But part of them was stopping them and holding them back from moving in that direction. And so upon exploring deeper, we discovered that there was a shadow aspect holding back that creative expression and holding her back from moving in the direction of creating that business, because there was a fear that was there. So there was a sense that if she moved in that direction, what would happen is that she would lose connection with a support system. So the goal was about being able to travel and being able to be creative, but there wasn't anything that related to community connection within those goals. And so there was part of her that that was sabotaging that goal. That is, until she started to actually incorporate community connection into her conscious goals. I also had another client who was really holding himself back in his business, and so he wasn't making a lot of money because he wasn't doing the things to actually grow the business and to expand the business, and he didn't know why. But what we found upon deeper exploration is that he didn't trust himself with power. He was like, oh, what if I'm like actually deep down, I'm like a bad person, and if I'm given power, then that's going to be really negative. And so we had to explore to figure out where that belief was coming from, and there was a lot of internalizing blame and responsibility for the wrongdoings of others around him. And so he had taken that on as his own problem, his own issue, when it was actually him taking blame for other people. And so what he had to do is he had to actually give back what wasn't his to take on. So to not take on responsibility for what wasn't his. And that way he could take on the power and the responsibility that was his. So to give another client example, I had this other client. He was always playing it small and holding himself back because he was afraid of being exposed as an imposter. And so what we had to do is we had to figure out where was that perception coming from. And part of the perception was coming from seeing himself as an imposter while seeing other people as having some inherent authority that was there that he just didn't possess. And so we actually had to work to get him more into connection with his sense of personal sovereignty in order for him to give himself a license to expand and to be seen and to recognize himself as not an imposter, but somebody who is possessing of license and authority to fully be themselves. And to give a more personal example, there was a time where I was running into procrastination and self-sabotage and basically trying to hide away from doing work towards my business that's really important to me. And what I was doing is the story that I was telling myself about the work was all about, oh, I'm going to like have this huge impact and I'm going to save the world and, I'm going to resolve all of these deeper root cause issues for everything. And there was this sense of responsibility towards the whole world woven into it. So I was really inspired by it, but part of me was totally overwhelmed by that sense of responsibility that came along with that kind of power fantasy of being the one that's going to come in and save the day. And so I actually had to shift and change the way that I was thinking about my goals to thinking about serving a narrower audience and having a smaller impact and not having this sense of like, oh, this is my mission or this is my duty to do this. Ultimately being able to see it as a choice and as something that everybody is helping save the world, and I'm just like one small player in a much bigger movement. So in each of these examples, each of us had to recognize the resistance, see the resistances coming from the shadow, being able to validate that and to say that that's valid. It's coming from an important place and there's an important message that this aspect has for me. Then being able to discover the root cause and then being able to resolve the problem at the root cause. Now, if you want to learn more about how to stay consistently motivated towards working on your goals, I highly recommend checking out this video right here where I go over a common pattern that kills your motivation.